My family abandoned me when I had nothing. Now I've built everything alone and they want back in, but what I sent them last left them speechless. I'm a 30-year-old man, and my story starts with a drunk driver, a rainy highway, and the sound of my spine cracking against a seatbelt 3 weeks before Christmas. I was driving home from work. The rain had been coming down hard all evening, the kind that made every lane shimmer with confusion. I was only 10 minutes from home when a pickup truck ran a red light and smashed directly into the driver's side of my car. I didn't see it coming. All I remember is the metal folding, the airbags going off, and everything going black. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU with a tube in my throat, a brace around my neck, and pain everywhere. Doctors told me I had a fractured spine, a shattered femur, 3 broken ribs, and internal bleeding that almost killed me. The impact twisted my body so violently that they weren't sure I'd walk normally again. The nurse explained I'd need at least 8 months of physical therapy, maybe more. That was already bad enough, but what really broke me was the silence. No one was there when I opened my eyes. No flowers, no texts, no family crowding around. Just beeping monitors and the sounds of nurses outside my door. I asked if anyone had come to visit. The nurse said, "No, not yet." It wasn't until the 3rd day that my parents showed up. My older sister came too. They stood awkwardly near the window, avoiding eye contact. My mom brought a bag of grapes, like it was a casual afternoon visit. My dad made a joke about how I'd finally taken a break from working overtime. My sister scrolled through her phone the entire time. They stayed for 15 minutes and left. I didn't hear from them again. My girlfriend, well, my ex now, came once. She stood by the bed, eyes wide with panic, barely able to look at me. The next time I heard from her was 2 days later. A text. She said, "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I didn't sign up for this kind of future." That was it. 4 years together, gone in 8 words. While I was still recovering in the hospital, the bills started coming. My job filed me under temporary disability, so my income dropped to a fraction of what I'd been making. The car was totaled. I was still paying rent on an apartment I couldn't even get to. Between the ambulance ride, emergency surgery, and hospital stay, my savings evaporated in less than 2 weeks. I called my dad, asked him for help, just a few $100s to cover groceries and part of January's rent. He sighed and said, "You've always been independent. Handle it." Then he hung up. My sister didn't even pick up. My mom told me she was tight on funds and reminded me that everyone's struggling right now. She didn't ask where I was staying. She didn't ask if I could walk yet. By mid-January, I got served an eviction notice. I couldn't work, I couldn't move properly, and I couldn't pay. My landlord gave me until the end of the month to vacate. When I called my family again, desperate, asking if I could stay in the guest room, my mom said it wasn't a good time. My sister had the flu, apparently, and they didn't want me bringing hospital germs. I slept in my rental car for 5 nights. I parked in the lot behind my old gym, kept the engine off to save fuel, pulled the seat back, and wrapped myself in hospital blankets. The brace around my leg made it nearly impossible to get comfortable. I barely slept. I barely ate. I counted coins to buy drive-through fries. I had to crawl to public restrooms using my arms because I couldn't put pressure on my leg without the crutches. Crutches I couldn't carry easily without a bag, which I didn't have. A coworker, someone I wasn't even close to, found out after seeing me parked outside the office lot one night. He insisted I come stay with him. He and his wife gave me their pull-out couch. They cooked. They helped me get to doctor appointments. Strangers, practically, treated me like I mattered more than my own blood did. A few days later, I saw photos online from Christmas. My whole family, smiling around the dinner table, candles, wine, matching pajamas. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately left out. On New Year's Day, my sister called. She said they hadn't helped me because they didn't want to enable me. She said I needed to learn how to ask for help the right way, whatever that meant. I asked her if they even cared that I couldn't walk without help, couldn't bathe properly, couldn't cover my medical co-pays. She told me I was being dramatic. I left voicemails. I cried in them, told them I didn't know what to do, told them I was scared. I got one response, a text from my dad, "Get it together, man." When I tried one last time, called my mom from the couch I was borrowing, told her I needed support just until I could stand on my own, she told me to stop guilt-tripping everyone. Then she blocked my number. That was the moment something in me just shut off. I don't remember much from the 2 weeks that followed. Panic attacks, numb days. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, not even able to cry anymore. If I had access to anything more dangerous than crutches, I probably wouldn't be here. Then one afternoon, I got an email. My old college professor had heard about the accident through a mutual friend. He offered me a room above his garage, said it wasn't much, but I could stay rent-free until I figured things out. I accepted without hesitation. He picked me up the next morning, helped me carry my things, just a duffel bag and my brace. As I looked in the mirror that night, bruises still yellow on my skin, I made a silent vow. I would never ask them for help again. I would never give them another chance to abandon me. They had their chance. Now it was mine. The physical therapy center was tucked between a laundromat and a dentist's office, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. I went twice a week. The sessions started with stretching, then balance drills, then walking with parallel bars. The first time I stood without help, my left leg shook like it was made of paper. By the end of the second week, I was making it across the room on crutches. The pain made my vision blur, but I showed up every time. No excuses, no missed sessions. Back in the small room above the garage, I opened my laptop each morning like it was a lifeline. I taught myself new tools, updated my old portfolios, and started picking up freelance gigs. Graphic design, copywriting, branding for small businesses. The room didn't have a kitchen, just a microwave and mini fridge, so I got used to heating canned soup and working through dinner. Some nights I stayed up until 3 in the morning, chasing invoices or polishing drafts. The money trickled in at first, $50 logos, $100 website edits. It wasn't much, but it added up. Within 3 months, I didn't need food stamps anymore. I paid for my own therapy sessions, filled my prescriptions on time, and kept my phone plan active. It felt like breathing clean air after being underwater. Out of nowhere, 2 friends from college reached out. One sent me an Uber Eats gift card and asked for my Venmo. The other mailed a package with snacks, socks, and a handwritten letter. We hadn't talked in years, but they heard what happened and wanted to help. No guilt, no lectures, just genuine support. The professor I was living with started checking in every evening. He'd knock once and walk in with tea or takeout, ask how the leg was holding up, then offer small bits of advice. He showed me how to build a proper invoice system, how to negotiate rates, how to say no without apology. He told me to treat my comeback like a business plan, track every win, analyze every loss, and never let the people who gave up on me have a seat at the table again. A therapist in town agreed to work with me on a sliding scale. Her office smelled like citrus and old books. For the first time in my life, I spoke about the way my family had always operated, how they treated independence like a threat and emotional needs like weakness. The therapist didn't interrupt or try to fix me. She just listened. And every week, I walked out of her office a little straighter, a little less angry. From January to May, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no emails, nothing from my parents, nothing from my sister. No one asked how I was healing. No one checked if I could walk yet. I kept their numbers blocked and never looked back. By month 5, I switched from the cane to taking steps unaided. My stride was slow and uneven, but I made it from the garage to the mailbox without stopping. That same week, I signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment 15 minutes away. It had peeling paint and one working window AC unit, but it was mine. Every dollar of rent came from my own work. A week after I moved in, I landed my first big client, a 6-month contract with a startup looking to rebrand. It was steady money with room for growth. I bought a proper desk, stocked my fridge with real food, and even set up autopay for my phone bill. No more scraping, no more asking. After paying off one of my hospital debts, the professor drove me to the courthouse and took a photo of me standing at the top of the stairs with my crutches. He printed it out, framed it, and gave it to me before I moved out. He said it was proof that I could climb back from anything. Then one day, out of nowhere, a message came in from my mother's sister. Just one line, "Your dad says you're doing better. Good for you." No offer to reconnect, no question about what I'd been through. Just a vague pat on the back, like I'd won a spelling bee. I left the message on read. By summer, I looked nothing like the man who'd been sleeping in his car 5 months ago. I shaved my beard, trimmed my hair, and started strength training with a personal trainer my therapist recommended. I wore fitted clothes now, spoke with more confidence, stood taller. People in coffee shops started mistaking me for someone with options. I didn't correct them. Then came the text from my sister, "Heard you're doing okay. We knew you would bounce back eventually." That was it. No apology, no ownership, no mention of the months they ignored my voicemails, left me sleeping in a rental car, or blocked me when I begged for help. Just a smug pat on the back from the same people who watched me drown. I replied once, "Don't ever pretend you believed in me. You all left me for dead." Then I blocked her number again, this time for good. But a few days later, a voicemail came in from an unknown number. I realized later they must have used a new phone to bypass the block. It was my father's voice. The wedding invitation came in a white envelope with gold foil lettering and a wax seal on the back. No return address, just my name and apartment number typed out neatly. Inside was a formal invitation to my sister's wedding, 2 months from now at a vineyard outside the city. Black tie optional. There was no personal message, no note, just a printed RSVP card, and one line at the bottom of the invitation: family is everything. I brought the whole thing to my next therapy session and laid it on the table. My therapist looked at it for a long moment, then asked me one question: what do they want from you now? I didn't have an answer. 3 days later, my mother messaged me. After all this time, months of total silence, she sent a short message: "It would mean a lot to your sister if you were there." I didn't reply. Then my father called. I let it go to voicemail. First time I'd heard his voice since the accident. He didn't ask how I was doing or say anything about the recovery. He said I should be grateful they didn't coddle me when things got hard. Said, "Look where that got you, you bounced back. We were right not to interfere." I didn't delete the message, but I didn't respond either. A day later, another text came from my sister. "You're seriously holding a grudge during the happiest time of my life?" No mention of what happened. No acknowledgement of the hospital, the rental car, the nights I went without food. Just her own celebration, her big day. I drafted a formal "please reply decline," typed it out, printed it, signed it. I wrote, "You lost the right to call me family when you left me in a hospital bed alone." I mailed it back. The next phone call came from my aunt. She called under the excuse of checking in, but quickly brought up the wedding, said the family group chat was full of people calling me selfish, bitter, dramatic, said I was ruining what should be a joyful time. I asked her if she remembered what happened to me. She paused for a second, then said, "Well, that was a while ago." I told her I wasn't interested in updates anymore and ended the call. 2 nights later, a cousin I hadn't spoken to since college messaged me privately, said he saw everything in the group chat, and couldn't believe the way they were talking about me. He told them flat out that I had begged for help and got ignored, that none of them deserved to act shocked now. He said it didn't go over well, but he didn't care. I thanked him, but I didn't engage beyond that. I wasn't trying to recruit defenders. I just wanted them out of my life. My father left one more voicemail after that, a long one. Said I was embarrassing myself, said I was trying to make people feel sorry for me, instead of taking responsibility for my actions. Said I needed to grow up and stop playing the victim. I blocked his number right after I listened to it. I blocked my sister's number too. There would be no more texts, no more voicemails, no more reaching out. Whatever they had to say could stay in their private chat far away from me. The wedding went ahead without me. I only found out it had happened when a former coworker, who's distantly related to my sister's husband, mentioned it in passing. No one else contacted me. No one sent pictures. No one asked why I didn't come. They moved on with the narrative they built. One where I was the ungrateful one who cut them off for no reason. And honestly, I let them. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like peace. I still went to physical therapy every week. Still worked on the contract with the tech startup. Still stacked my savings and made progress with the personal trainer. I found a small community of other freelancers in the city who met twice a month to talk business and burnout. I got invited to a friend's housewarming. I made plans for a short vacation for the first time in 2 years. Then one morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment, clean cut, standing tall without any support, and realized something had shifted. I had spent the last year rebuilding. Now it was time to start growing. They had their chance to be part of the story. They had a front row seat to my hardest moments and chose to walk away. Now they could stay outside the theater while I built something bigger than any of them could imagine. I wasn't just going to recover anymore. I was going to thrive, and they'd have no choice but to watch it all from the sidelines. The email came through on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, official offer. The startup I'd been freelancing for over the past 6 months wanted to bring me on full-time. Remote position, full benefits, health and dental, stock options, paid vacation, and a salary 3 times what I was making before the accident. I accepted within the hour. The onboarding process started that afternoon. To celebrate, I booked a solo trip for the following week, a national park 2 states over. I packed light, trail shoes, simple gear, nothing fancy, and drove myself out there with music playing the whole way. No crutches, no cane, just my own 2 legs and the winding trails. I hiked until sunset, slept under the stars at a rented cabin, and made my own coffee each morning while the air was still cold and quiet. It was my first vacation since before the crash. It felt earned. When I returned, a friend from the freelancer circle invited me to a small group he was part of, Men in Recovery. Some were former athletes healing from injuries. Some were military veterans. A few were like me, rebuilding after family breakdowns or life-altering events. We met at a community center twice a month. No lectures, no forced bonding, just honesty. I joined immediately. Meanwhile, my phone stayed quiet. My parents never followed up after I declined the wedding. My sister never tried again. The group chat I'd heard about was probably still active, but no one reached out to me from it. Their silence was louder than anything they could have said, and I let it stay that way. Then a letter arrived at my apartment. I'd recently updated my address through official channels, and I suspect someone accessed it indirectly through an old billing record or mutual contact. Inside was a formal notice stating that my parents were adjusting their estate plans. It was written like in "For your information." The message was simple. I should expect to be excluded from any inheritance. Ever since the inheritance letter arrived, I'd retained a lawyer through my job's legal network. When the estate message came in, I simply had them send back a formal statement on my behalf. No further communication necessary. I relinquish any and all claim to family assets, effective immediately. No fuss, no back and forth, just closure. Instead of wasting time thinking about them, I used my new company's education assistance program to enroll in an online MBA. I kept up with coursework in the evenings, balancing it with work and workouts. The days were packed, but every one of them moved me forward. A few months later, I started looking at real estate. I'd been saving consistently, kept my lifestyle simple, and had a down payment ready. My realtor showed me a quiet one-bedroom cottage just outside the city, surrounded by trees, with a wraparound porch and enough yard to breathe. I put in an offer the same day. It was accepted 2 days later. I signed the paperwork with my own name, alone, on the deed. On move-in day, I stood in the living room, with the windows open and the walls bare, and knew I had crossed a line they'd never see again. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a new beginning. A few months later, a cousin I hadn't spoken to since high school drove to my property and rang the gate intercom. He did a double take before realizing who I was. We caught up for a few minutes and he asked if I wanted to grab lunch sometime. I agreed, not for nostalgia, but for closure. At lunch, he brought up my father, said he'd seen him at a local fundraiser. According to him, my father had been talking about how I refused help and had gone off the rails somewhere out west. I didn't react. I just laid out the truth, what really happened, how they all disappeared when I needed them most, and how I'd built everything I had without a single dollar from them. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and said, "That sounds more like them, to be honest. We paid our bills separately and didn't make plans to meet again." A few days later, a voicemail popped up from an unknown number. It only played once before I flagged it. It was my father's voice. He didn't say his name, but there was no mistaking it. Just a short message: "Hope you enjoy your solitude. You chose it." I forwarded the number to my carrier and had it permanently screened. That line would never be open again. With that, I deleted every last backup of their contacts. No hidden email threads, no saved voicemails, no chance of re-entry. My phone belonged to the future, not the past. The last thing I did was write a letter, not to send, just for me. I listed everything, from the moment I woke up alone in the hospital to the day the inheritance letter arrived. I signed it at the bottom, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in a fireproof lockbox under my bed. On the front, I labeled it, "The Past." I meant it. The call came from a number I didn't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. A man introduced himself as my sister's fiancé. His voice was shaky, like he didn't want to be the one doing this. He said she wanted to talk, that she was hoping I'd hear her out. Then he asked me to please call back. I deleted it without playing it twice. I'd never met the guy, and I never would. My number wasn't for anyone from that family anymore. It didn't matter how politely they asked or who they sent. A week later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return name, just a familiar handwriting on the envelope. Inside was 4 pages, handwritten, folded neatly. It was from my sister. There was no apology, just pages of explaining. She didn't say she was sorry for anything that happened. She said I was making things harder than they needed to be. She said I was choosing to carry hate. She said family was complicated, but we still owed it to each other to reconnect before it was too late. I read every word once, then folded it back up and locked it away in a folder I'd labeled for documentation only, just in case anything got out of hand. What bothered me more than the letter itself was that she had my address at all. I called my old landlord that evening, the one who owned the place above the professor's garage. He sounded surprised to hear from me. When I asked if he'd given out my new address to anyone, he hesitated. He admitted my mother had tricked him months ago, pretending to be from a hospital billing agency. I hadn't anticipated that angle back then, but I updated all my forwarding settings immediately after that call. The next day, I changed my phone number, not just for peace of mind, but because I wanted to close every door they thought they still had a key to. I also had a home security system installed, cameras, smart locks, motion sensors, no loopholes left, no soft entry points. A few days later, the fiancé reached out again, through email. He said he didn't know the full story, but that he was caught in the middle and just passing along her request. His tone was cautious, more emotional, but still felt like a messenger more than a man with any stake in it. He said my sister was pregnant, they were expecting their first child. She wanted to mend things before the baby arrived. He asked me to consider at least speaking with her once, for the sake of the child. I didn't reply. A pregnancy doesn't undo abandonment. A baby doesn't rewrite what they did to me when I needed them most. At my next therapy session, I mentioned the email. My therapist listened carefully and then said something that stuck. It sounds like they want your forgiveness for their comfort, not because they're sorry. Later that week, a box arrived at my front door with no return label. Inside was a baby onesie and a card that said, "Your nephew deserves to know his uncle." That was it. No names, no signatures, just that. I left the package sealed, walked it straight to the outdoor trash bin, and dropped it in without a second thought. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote one sentence in my journal. Children should be raised by people who understand love. You made sure I never would. A few days passed. Then another message came, this time from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. My mother's second husband. I'd overlooked tightening my social media privacy settings, and he slipped through. I ignored it. He followed up saying, "They're in pain, you know." I replied once, "Good." Then I blocked him too. I took that energy and redirected it. I joined a mentorship program run through a community nonprofit. Twice a month, I meet with young men trying to rebuild after trauma. Some from injury, some from addiction, others from broken homes. I share what I know, not as a counselor, but as someone who's been through the fire and found a way to walk out. Not long after that, a coworker from my remote job invited me to a small industry dinner. At the table, his father overheard my name and asked if I was related to someone from a nearby city. Turned out my father had been name-dropping me at events, telling people I'd lost my way and that he was grieving a son who cut off the family for no reason. I didn't react, just finished my plate. Later that night, the coworker messaged me privately. He told me that after I left, he explained the real story to his father. Everything, the hospital, the silence, the betrayal. His father didn't say much, but admitted quietly I've never been more embarrassed. The final attempt came a week later. Another letter from my sister. This one was shorter, written in rushed handwriting. It ended with, "You won't even see the baby once. That's the path you're choosing." I shredded it and burned the pieces in my backyard fire pit. No photos, no ceremony, just ashes. Like everything they tried to salvage, they called it silence. I called it protection. The promotion came in the middle of a routine Monday morning call. The department lead walked through a few project metrics, then dropped the news. Effective immediately, I was being promoted to head of design. It meant managing a small but growing team, having a seat at strategic meetings, and finally stepping into a six-figure salary with stock options and a confirmed leadership track. I said thank you, accepted the offer, and scheduled my first team sync for later that week. With the pay increase, I finally had the space to invest in the house. I hired a local contractor to help with some of the larger tasks, but most of it I did myself. I gutted and rebuilt the kitchen over 6 weekends, tile by tile, cabinet by cabinet. After that, I built a back deck from scratch, leveled it, stained it, sealed it, paid in full. No loans, no family handouts. My name was on every receipt, every invoice. My hands were in every nail. On my 33rd birthday, I grilled steak on that new deck. The sun had set, the lights were strung, and there was music playing low from a speaker near the garden. I poured a glass of good whiskey, opened a novel I'd been meaning to finish, and watched the stars come out one by one. No calls came through, no messages, and none were missed. 2 weeks later, a letter showed up from a law office I didn't recognize. The firm was unfamiliar at first, but the contents made it clear. My father had suffered a stroke and was in critical condition. The letter asked whether I wanted to be listed as an emergency contact or next of kin. I responded through my lawyer, a one-line statement. He lost that right the day he ignored my ICU stay. No contact, no role. An email followed a few days later. My sister, this time, she said it was serious, said he might not survive, said I would regret it if I didn't visit. She kept the tone careful, but it was obvious she needed something. I didn't reply. I remembered exactly how it felt lying in that hospital bed. Ribs broken, legs split, lungs fighting to breathe. I remembered the nurse saying no one had called. I remembered my mother's voice telling me not to guilt-trip people. A mutual acquaintance from my college days, someone who now lived in my city, brought something up during coffee. He mentioned casually that my sister had been trying to raise funds to help with my father's medical costs. Quietly, privately, asking around. I didn't ask how he knew. I just nodded, paid for both our drinks, and left. The next email came that same week, again from my sister. This time, she didn't try to be subtle. She said they were short on money, that the hospital stay, rehab, and post-stroke care were more than they expected. She said she knew I was doing well. Asked if I could help just this once. I didn't finish reading. I deleted the message without a second thought. The next morning, I called my lawyer and had them draft a formal, no-contact letter addressed to every member of my immediate family. My mother, my father, and my sister. It was short, simple, and legally binding. All further communication was to go through counsel, and only in the event of legal necessity. Any contact outside those terms would be considered harassment. While organizing old files, I found a framed photo at the back of a drawer, all of us, standing together in a park from years ago, some reunion I barely remembered. My father's hand was on my shoulder, my sister was in the middle. My mother had her sunglasses up on her head. I looked at the photo for 2 seconds, maybe 3, then walked it out to the trash bin and dropped it in without blinking. That night, I added one more line to my journal before bed. You left me to die. Now you ask for help because you are dying. That's not karma, that's consequence. A few days later, I hosted a small gathering in the backyard. Just friends, people from work, from the mentorship group, from the neighborhood. We grilled, shared stories, made jokes about terrible dates and strange neighbors. No one asked about my family. No one knew who they were, they only knew who I was now. We toasted to resilience. The music played into the night. A week after the gathering, I got a text from an old mutual friend. Short message, my sister had given birth. A baby boy, mother and child were healthy. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down. There was no anger, no sadness, no ache. Just a quiet room, a full life, and the sound of the wind brushing across the new deck outside. A certified envelope showed up on a Thursday morning, signed for by the delivery service. Inside were official legal papers, an urgent request to designate me as medical power of attorney for my father. According to the documents, his condition had worsened rapidly. He was no longer capable of making medical decisions, and they needed someone to act on his behalf. I took the packet, shredded every page, and dropped the pieces into a trash bag. They wanted me to carry the legal responsibility for a man who hadn't lifted a finger when I was clinging to life in an ICU bed. He hadn't called, he hadn't shown up, he hadn't even asked if I'd survived. A few days later, another letter arrived. This time, it wasn't mailed. It was hand-delivered by a courier. Neat envelope, cream-colored paper, inside a long handwritten note from my sister, pages of pleading urgency masked as family duty. She said I was the only one who could help now, that Dad needed me, that it wasn't about the past, it was about doing the right thing in the present. I read the entire thing carefully. Not once in those pages did she take ownership for what happened. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the voicemails I left crying, or the nights I slept in a rental car, or the text from our father telling me to get it together. Just desperation, because now they needed something again. I contacted my lawyer, asked if there was any scenario where I could be legally bound to this. He reviewed the documents, checked state guidelines, and confirmed, unless I signed something, I had no responsibility. I told him I'd never sign. He said he'd draft a formal notice of refusal, just in case they tried to push again. That weekend, I got a message from someone I knew through my therapist's trauma group, a nurse at the hospital where my father was staying. She'd heard my name come up during a shift and, without breaking any formal rules, quietly passed along a piece of information. My father was incoherent now, confused, asking for his son over and over again, mumbling it in between moments of lucidity. I didn't go. He'd had a choice back then. When my body was broken, when I was alone, when I couldn't even reach a glass of water without help, he chose silence. So I returned the favor. I finished my first MBA semester with straight A's. My work performance didn't drop once. Around the same time, I signed a deal to partner with a boutique creative agency downtown. I'd lead their design division while maintaining my role at the tech company. 2 income streams, full independence, no one to answer to, no one to save. A week later, a cousin I hadn't spoken to since high school drove to my property and rang the gate intercom. He didn't announce who he was, but I recognized his voice. I didn't respond. I stood in my upstairs window and watched him walk back to his car after a few minutes. The camera caught it all. I upgraded my security that same afternoon, installed perimeter motion lights, upgraded the cameras, and left specific instructions with neighbors to report any uninvited visitors. Anyone who showed up at my gate without notice would be reported. No exceptions, no discussions. Then came a letter from the hospital. Plain envelope, white label. They confirmed that my father had passed away. No details about the funeral, no final message from the family, just a single paragraph confirming that the end had come. A cold clinical update. I folded the letter once and slid it into the fireproof lockbox with my legal papers. No grief, no anger, just the kind of finality that feels like a page closing. The next call came from the executor of the estate, a formal notice that I'd been left off everything. No inheritance, no mention, no provisions, exactly as they had warned. I told the executor to relay one message back to whoever needed to hear it. Perfect. Tell them I wouldn't have taken a cent if they begged me to. A few days later, one last letter arrived. My sister, again. The envelope was thin, the handwriting sharp and messy. I didn't open it right away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page. No more pretending, no more polite phrases, just venom. You'll die alone. Bitter. Forgotten. I didn't read the rest. I folded the paper slowly, walked it out to the trash can beside the garage, and dropped it in. Lid shut, done. That was the last time I heard from any of them, and that's exactly how it will stay. Months after my father's funeral, another courier came to the house. This one handed me a flat envelope in a padded folder and asked for a signature. The sender's name was my sister. Inside there was a smaller envelope with a note, to be opened in 18 years, from your nephew, for his future uncle. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't asked to be involved in that child's life. I didn't even know the kid's name. I resealed the outer envelope and handed it back to the courier the next morning, returned unopened. Tucked inside had been a printed photo, a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, lying in a crib. Next to it was a second note from my sister. He deserves to know his family. No apology, no accountability, just another angle, another attempt to fold me back into their story. I returned that too. Same as before, no space for manipulation, no tolerance for rewritten history. While they were busy trying to attach me to a future I didn't ask for, I was building mine. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a university as part of a recovery and resilience lecture series. One of the organizers had read an article I'd contributed to and reached out. I flew in, gave a talk to a room of students and professionals, and afterward, a line formed, people wanting to thank me, ask questions, share pieces of their own stories. I shook hands, signed programs, and walked out of that auditorium with my head up. I took the momentum from that event and finished something I'd started years ago. My first book, a self-published work about healing from betrayal, loss, and rebuilding without a safety net. I left out names, places, anything traceable. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I wrote it for the people who had no one come for them and made it anyway. 2 months after the book launched, I got a letter from my old high school track coach. Handwritten, he said he found the book by accident and realized it was me halfway through. You outlived them, he wrote, in every way that counts. That same month, I made my final mortgage payment. The house was mine, paid off entirely by the work I put in. No CO signers, no family loans, no hidden help, just a man with a busted spine, some design skills, and a whole lot of boundaries. At one of the resilience seminars I was attending, I met someone. Smart, direct, kind. We kept crossing paths at sessions, then sat together during lunch. Conversations turned into long walks, then dinner. She had her own scars, different but deep. She understood what it meant to rebuild alone. On our 5th date, I told her everything, no sugarcoating, from the crash to the hospital to the inheritance threats. She didn't flinch. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "That's not your shame. That's their failure." We kept seeing each other. I didn't regret cutting my family out. Not anymore. What I regretted was giving them so many chances first. Every ignored voicemail, every unanswered message, every time I hoped they'd show up and they didn't, I gave too much room. Now the door wasn't just closed, it was sealed. I returned to the hospital where I'd almost died, this time as part of a donation drive for trauma patients. A nurse near the reception desk recognized me, her eyes widened, then welled up. "You were the one we all thought wouldn't make it," she said. She walked me down the hall and pointed out the room where I'd stayed. The walls were freshly painted. The bed was different, but I remembered the ceiling tiles. Before I left, I scribbled a note on a clean index card and taped it gently to the underside of the bed frame. Sometimes the ones you need most walk away, and sometimes you're better off because of it. Back at home, I made one final decision. I contacted the local post office and requested that any future mail from my sister, her husband, or anyone tied to that name be marked returned to sender. I filed the forms. From now on, their words would never land at my door again. That weekend, I grilled steak under the stars again. Same setup as before, deck lights on, speaker humming low, glass of bourbon nearby. The wind rustled the leaves overhead. I stood there for a moment, the quiet stretching out around me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I had built a life so full there was no room for old ghosts. Mercy isn't always deserved. Sometimes denying it is how you show yourself you matter. My family turned their backs on me during the darkest moment of my life. I rose anyway, and when they came crawling back trying to rewrite the past, trying to pull me into their narrative again, I closed the door, locked it, and walked away for good.